I work for a big multinational tech company. So I work for a tech organization, have done for years. So I do a lot of development work in terms of data centers, migration, CRM software development, ERPs, WMSs, database, SANs, all that kind of boring stuff. So I've been around and worked as a developer and architect, and then leading teams in development now. So I'm more of what you would call a senior. And because of the nature of the business, you do get and see and speak to a lot of different people that do a lot of different things. I think that's always been my core interest. I always knew from a very young age when I first started programming at 6, 7, that this was what I wanted to do. And I do miss just being a programmer, for want of a better description. I do miss just having a brief, getting on with it, thinking of the problem, solving it, developing it, shipping it, whatever.
I understand why so many console gamers fundamentally don't understand anything about what they're playing.
It's true, and I think it's sometimes there's bliss in ignorance, isn't there? There's ignorance in the bliss. You don't need to have huge amounts of pixels anymore. It's all about the quality, not the quantity.
People watched my recent video that touched on like PlayStation leaks, and it's like, guys, at no point in that video was I saying the PlayStation was stronger. I'm just saying it's far more capable based on everyone I talk to than what a lot of people are acting like. And I'm not saying the Xbox Series X is weak.
I said it in my video, and I stand by it. And I've had a lot of people say they want me to do a video. So if anyone's watching this, I will be doing a video discussing Halo. But it's all about the engine. I said that in the video. And it's not about the engine per se. It's about the limitations that the engine gives them. If that was the best game they could show, then it's doomed. They've got a bigger problem for launch than even I thought they have. You can't write checks that your ass can't cash, as the saying goes. And don't get me wrong. I think collectively, they're still doing an exceptionally good job. Their hardware's great. They've delivered a superb product. They're doing a good job of marketing the hardware with the differences that it's got. But Microsoft have kind of believed their own hype, because when they started touting teraflops and power, and I think it worked with the Xbox One X. It was now the most powerful console on the market. But that's about you feeling good. It's not about your audience feeling good. If you only buy a console to worry about how many teraflops it's got, then you're buying it for the wrong reasons. That's what PCs exist for, because you can sit at a PC and say, I've got 24 teraflops. Great. It's not doing anything, but it's there if I want to use it. Had the PlayStation 1 never come around, the Saturn would have been an absolute bomb. It would have blew everyone away. But it was it was up against PlayStation. So the PlayStation was just a million miles better. Not because it was more powerful, but because it was easy to develop for. It had better support. It had better software libraries. That's what Microsoft lacked at Xbox One. They're lacking it again here.
Drill specifically into that point, because I think people get obsessed with the word powerful, and they miss the point that it's not about having one number the biggest or even two. It's about targeting the right technology for the time to make better games. Like, imagine if last gen, all people argued about was the fact that the Xbox One's processor was clocked, 7-9% faster. And like, all we did is say that and talk about that. It didn't really help them that much, guys. So I don't know how to convey that to people, except that I think you're starting to see it finally play out where the game's graphics are just going to do the talking.
Was that Epic have now delivered the true taste of next-generation titles thanks to their reveal of Unreal Engine 5. And it probably also solidifies what everyone thought wasn't real in the Hellblade 2 trailer, because yep, that ain't that far off in terms of what we saw. Now, that was Unreal Engine 4, but obviously the Unreal Engine 5 that we've now seen in the flesh, thanks to the PS5 reveal in gameplay, was actually showing the fact that these games can all be moved and shifted lock, stock and barrel to Unreal Engine 5, due to the fact that it does contain one of the biggest changes in real-time rendering, and that is those micro polygons. Obviously the Lumen engine is another big part of it, but this is all centered around one of the biggest changes and that gigantic leap that Sony are pushing forward in that PS5's I/O and SSD structure. I'm really going to touch on what came out of this Unreal Engine demo and just what we can expect in the next generation, and whether or not that SSD is actually making a big difference here or not. So the exciting part there is really think about what the Sony studios are going to be delivering on this hardware, because they've had even longer to play around with this than Epic have. And that takes us nicely onto the biggest part of the engine, and probably the one that's singly most impressive. And it's not new. It's totally not new. So micropolygons are all based on Lucasfilm's generation way back in the 80s of rays. Render everything your eyes ever saw, or the road to Point Reyes, which was a location near Lucasfilm when this image was created, the very first high-resolution computer image in 1983. Lucasfilm later to become Pixar, who single-handedly generate the computer graphic films we still love today. And this technology is and has been the inspiration and the aim for all real-time rendering to move into. And now that inspiration is now becoming a reality. And when we think about this micro-polygon technology, it basically takes that high polygon image, it breaks it down into micro-polygons to make it small enough to fit under a pixel. I think a quarter of a pixel is as small as it goes to. So my approximation here is they're almost certainly using the mesh shader, or the primitive shader of the PS5 here, to generate this image quality, and basically handle the process in terms of not having to rasterize every single triangle per pixel, because that would be too expensive as a rasterization solution, or the mesh shader in terms of the new solutions that are coming forward in this new generation of hardware. And this means that you can cull images, you can cull polygons, you can cull triangles at a very micro level, much more than we've ever done before. And the faster you cull this and the quicker you do, you're maximizing what you're getting out of the hardware. And this ability to choose between a meshlet, which is the solution in the mesh shader, or actually just go straight to backface culling, triangle culling, and an individual primitive and vertex level, that's the micro level, and that's exactly what we're seeing here in the micro polygon solution. Everything is being handled at a micro level, and that means they can just maximize the detail on screen, the density and the polygon density, and that can only happen if you can get all that data into RAM. And that's exactly where the SSD and the I/O solution from the PS5 comes into play. And that means that all that data can be shipped into the system, into VRAM, to be rendered on screen as needed. Now this still needs a very powerful GPU. This is still going to scale very heavily on the GPU. That's obvious, because it's pushing triangle counts, it's pushing density, it's pushing draws very, very high. But this wouldn't be possible if it couldn't have an extended level of VRAM or a secondary solution, which is what Sony has built around the entire PS5. This was a developer's machine made by developers for developers. That wasn't a cliche, like I said then, and it's absolutely true now. They all asked for SSDs, that's what they've got, but Sony's gone one step ahead and really integrated and built the entire system around that I/O solution. And that means that even though the Xbox and PCs to come, they are going to have to catch up, and they certainly will. Sometime next year, I'm sure we'll see solutions that catch this up. They're going to have to bring this into their level, because unless you're giving a VRAM of a 30-40 gigabytes of VRAM, you're not going to get near these levels of image quality, density, and objects. Because unless you're giving a VRAM of a 30-40 gigabytes of VRAM, you're not going to get near these levels of image quality, density, and objects. Because unless you're giving a VRAM of a 30-40 gigabytes of VRAM, you're not going to get near these levels of image quality, density, and objects. Being able to calculate a vertex level means shadow maps can be wrapped around that as well. Therefore, you're getting per pixel shadow maps, because it's per triangle, to give you really sharp and clean images. And then you just need to basically use that accumulation to sort out the sample rates and minimize the effort on the GPU. So they're still going to have to use stochastic solutions, accumulation solutions, and dynamic resolution solutions, because this kind of level of rendering is going to scale very badly with resolution, just like ray tracing does, because we're now talking about per triangle, per pixel, and that obviously means the more pixels, the more triangles, and the more load. But where the I/O and the speed of the PS5 really comes into play is the part at the end of the demonstration. Being able to stream in that many assets, that many objects at that speed is never ever going to be done outside of having this kind of hardware. Is never ever going to be done outside of having this kind of hardware. Is never ever going to be done outside of having this kind of hardware. Is never ever going to be done outside of having this kind of hardware, because there's just far too much density in that sequence, in that element, to be able to be running that without using this as a solution. And that's simply because you can't have this amount of detailed density objects in RAM at one time. It's just not possible. There's not enough RAM. It's just not possible. There's not enough RAM. But what you can do is bring that in over the course of the next couple of frames, or the next, in this case, 30 frames. So potentially you only need to hold in 1 second of data in real time in gameplay before you can stream and fill that back up with new data, just as Cerny said. So that sequence you just saw, even though there's some obviously issues there with the motion blur, the sampling's not that great, the per object motion blur, the velocity blur, the radial blur, it's still impressive because there's no pop-in, there's no LOD, there's all the elements that we've touched on. So all these solutions that are being delivered here means that authoring doesn't have to happen anymore. You don't have to take a high density model, break it down to multiple LODs and ship it in the game and make multiple versions. That means you reduce draw calls on the system. It also means that you don't have to bake normal maps into it to give that detail back. It means that on a section just then, you're not using imposters in the background, sprites, to mimic a real life geometry object and then swapping that over to a real geometric object when it gets up close and then having to draw that 5 or 6 times in different distances. Look at a game here like Assassin's Creed Odyssey on the PC. You can see here on the demo that the LOD is terrible. The density here is amazing. The game's beautiful, do not get me wrong, but this is exactly the limitations that this solution gets rid of, the IO solution. This solution gets rid of the IO solution because it no longer has to worry about keeping all that density in image at one time. The shadow maps, the popping, all the errors there I'm highlighting, you can see them popping in. All that's gone away because we've kind of gone backwards. We've moved back from teraflops are no longer important, teraflops are no longer important, teraflops are no longer important. It's now about maximizing the triangle count. We've almost gone back to the days of my Sega Saturn box here where it's all about how many triangles per second. That's now the most important metric here. How many triangles per second? That's now the most important metric here. How many triangles per second? That's now the most important metric here. And just like the old Sega 32 boards, this really is all about using that sprite scaling technique in a modern 3D geometric object. So rather than actually create multiple LODs and mirror different distances and object detail by using lots of hard work and authoring, you now just take an object, whatever polygon count it is, and let the engine work out what it needs to render in terms of a tessellation process nearer or further away from the camera. Just scale it, just like the old arcade games. That, for me, is why I'm really, really excited about this next generation of hardware. And this is really just tip of the iceberg kind of stuff in the kind of changes not only can this offer visually, but also in gameplay solutions.
It's time to see what's next.